Well, hello, xenographers everywhere, and welcome to another episode. I love going out onto the street with a camera and just walking around to see what images will present themselves. I'm really interested in the combinations of shape and colour you can find on the street that always reveal themselves if you look. I also love street portraits, candid shots of people just going about their business. But which is the best focal length to use on the street? To find out, I've been shooting on the street with 5 lenses of different focal lengths: a 28mm, a 50mm, a 135mm, a 200 and a 300mm, to see how well each length works in practice. For this test, I used the Zuiko 28mm f3.5, but there are lots of other 28s I could have used. It isn't a fast lens, but it doesn't need to be. What's needed here is deep focus, so I stopped down to f11, set the lens to about 1.2 meters, and that gave me focus from zero point 0.8 meters to about 3 meters. It's a sharp and contrasty lens, so it's well suited to street work. Colours are rich and strong, vibrant and punchy, which, personally, I rather like. Many people prefer black and white for street photography. It has a dynamic, gritty sort of feel that seems to suit the genre. It foregrounds light and shadow, form and line, and can transform the mundane into the beautiful. The high contrast of this lens means it handles black and white very nicely, and its inherent deep focus means you don't miss too many shots, and stop down, it makes some very cool octagonal bokeh too. To make street portraits with this lens, you need to get close, and that can be daunting. If you want the shot though, you just have to get close, point your camera and shoot. I've found the more you do it, the easier it gets, and if you're shooting in a big city, people seem much more willing subjects too. I found street shooting a little more difficult with a 50mm. Its shallower depth of field makes focusing more difficult even when you're stopped down. For this shoot, I used the Leica 50mm f2. There are any number of 50mm I could have used, but I chose this one because it has a focusing tab, and that makes zone focusing much easier. If you stop down to f8 or f11, different positions of the focusing tab, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock, give you sharp focus at different distance ranges. Remember these positions and zone focusing is much easier. I must admit, I didn't get it right every time, but generally it seemed to work quite well, and you don't need a Leica lens to do it. Other lenses with tabs include the early Jupiter 8, the collapsible Industar 22 and 50, and the Fed 10. 50mm is a great focal length for general photography, and it works pretty well out on the street. You don't need to get quite so close to the subject as you do with a wide-angle lens, so it's not quite so daunting to use. Sometimes people's reactions to being photographed bring a certain magic. What you're capturing is a moment of emotion that just pours out of the photograph, and because human minds are empathetic, when we look at the shot, we feel it too. The Summitar makes beautiful colour images, and it works really well for black and white too. And once you get used to the positions of the focusing tab, zone focusing becomes a whole lot easier. And stop down, it makes some great sunstars too. Using longer lenses on the street really changes the game, and accurate focusing becomes much easier. The extra reach of this Carl Zeiss Jenner 135mm that I used puts a good distance between you and your subject, so you're not going to make anyone feel uncomfortable. Candid shots are much easier to achieve, and that candid factor can help make a really nice street portrait. There's no need to stop down because you don't really need to zone focus. You can shoot wide open all day long, and the shallower depth of field of longer lenses means you'll get plenty of separation and some nice 3D pop. Using longer lenses, you can capture those little human moments, gestures and looks that can be lost with a shorter lens. The Zeiss Jenner 135 gives beautiful colour rendition and very soft background blur. It makes rich and contrasty black and white images too. It does lose contrast if you're shooting into the light though, but in my opinion, that's not always a bad thing. I got what I think are some nice shots with this 135, and it's a very useful focal length if you're out on the street. The next lens I used was a 200mm, in this case the Zuiko f4-200, but there are many other lenses in this focal length that you could use. I found candid shots became much easier with this lens. It really does have quite a bit of reach, and you can be quite distant from your subject and still get some really nice candid portraits. Lenses of this focal length don't need to be particularly fast to separate the subject from the background, even at very long subject to camera distances. For me, there's just something more appealing about images with some 3D pop. Somehow they're more aesthetically pleasing, more beautiful, and a 200mm really delivers the goods. This Zuiko 200 makes really beautiful images. It's got great colour and contrast, and its built-in hood and fairly modern coatings mean it copes pretty well with light sources in the frame. The only problem I found is with its size. It really is a big lens, and it's heavy too, neither of which are ideal for a street lens. In the image department though, I've got no complaints at all, and the images I made with it are, technically at least, the nicest ones I made on this shoot. Finally on this test, I used a 300mm lens, and for this focal length it's a case of all of the above plus a bit more. The reach of this focal length is quite something, and it's easy to get candid shots from quite some distance away. Since we're using such a long lens here, separation of the subject from the background is pretty much guaranteed. The lens I've used here is the Onar mirror lens, as it's the only one I have in this focal length, but there are many conventional glass element 300mm lenses available. Stopping down, or up for that matter, isn't an issue with this one, as it's fixed at f5.6. Contrast is pretty low, but it is very sharp. Background blur is there in abundance, but it's of a very odd kind. Point light sources become donut shapes, which, in most situations, to my eye at least, is rather harsh and jarring and not particularly pleasant to look at. But it's not present in all situations. For the amount of reach it has, it's a very small lens too, and it's very light, and that's a real boon when you're out on the street. As for which is the best of these focal lengths to use on the street, well, it really depends on your personal style and the kind of shots you want to make. As for me, I did enjoy the longer lenses for the candid shots they can make, but reactions from subjects can produce really great shots too. The nicest image of the shoot, I think, is this one, made with the Leica 50mm. For me, it has a beautiful quality that I can't quite put my finger on. I love the expression on the girl's face as she peers into the lens from amongst the crowd of people. There's just something magical about it. There's a communication going on in this shot. And for me, there's something about it that just works. For this reason, if no other, I'm going to say the 50mm focal length wins this particular contest. But they're all really useful focal lengths on the street, and I've enjoyed and got what I think are some nice results from them all. So that's it from me for now. Don't forget to like, subscribe and ring the bell before you go. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time for some more Zenography.